You're not a real veteran. Stop pretending. It's honestly disgusting. Karen's voice rang out like a slap across the face in the middle of the HOA meeting, every head in the room snapping toward her as if pulled by gravity. The community center's fluorescent lights buzzed above us, but it was nothing compared to the silence that fell after her accusation. Update 2. Here's a cleaned up, spell-checked version of your text with improved punctuation and readability, while preserving the. She mispronounced the acronym DOD. Karen didn't notice, but I did, and so did a retired Navy officer in the back row, who raised an eyebrow so high I thought it might float off his forehead. Karen beamed with smug satisfaction and said, "Now we're going to give the accused a chance to speak, if he dares." The room went silent. All eyes were on me. I stood up slowly, straightened my posture, not in intimidation, just out of habit, and said, "Thank you, Karen. I'd love the chance to speak." I walked calmly to the front and laid a folder of my own on the table. Inside were my military credentials, active duty identification, command verification from the Department of Defense, a letter from my base's public affairs office, photos of me receiving awards, certification from the Pentagon verifying my current role as base commander. And just to sweeten the moment, I included a formal warning from federal legal counsel outlining the consequences of falsely accusing or harassing an active duty service member. Karen's face dropped as I read the letter aloud, word for word. Her eyes darted across the page like a cornered rat looking for an escape hatch. I finished and calmly said, "Now, if anyone else would like to verify my status, the number for my public affairs officer is printed here. Feel free." Nobody moved. A few people coughed. One man audibly whispered, "Oh my God." Then came the applause. It wasn't loud or wild, just a few claps at first, then more. The retired Navy officer in the back stood up and saluted. I returned it without a word. Karen, meanwhile, looked like someone had yanked her batteries out. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, her hands trembling slightly as she grabbed for her flimsy file. She stammered something about privacy concerns and possible forgery, but it was clear her fantasy tribunal had just exploded in her face. I sat back down while the board members huddled in panicked whispers. Karen tried to take back the floor, but one of the newer board members stood up and said, "I think we've heard enough. I move that we formally dismiss this accusation and issue a written apology." Someone seconded it. A vote was taken. Karen tried to object, but this time, no one listened. The vote passed and the meeting was adjourned, not with a bang, but a stunned, quiet wave of embarrassment that followed Karen like a storm cloud as people left. Several neighbors came over to shake my hand. One even apologized for not speaking up earlier. The Navy vet gave me a firm nod and said, "Well played, Commander." I gave him a small smile and replied, "Sometimes silence is louder than shouting." As I stepped outside, I noticed Karen was already in her car, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. She peeled out of the parking lot like she was escaping a crime scene. The next day, she doubled down. In a desperate move, Karen posted a long-winded explanation on the community Facebook group titled My Side of the Story. In it, she claimed she was only trying to protect the neighborhood from imposters and that she was acting out of civic duty. The comments were brutal. "You need therapy," wrote one neighbor. "He's literally the base commander." "Sit down," said another. A meme emerged showing her face photoshopped onto a cartoon soldier with the caption "Karen of Valor." But things didn't stop there. She tried filing a formal complaint against me with the HOA's legal advisor, who promptly rejected her submission and warned her about harassment policies. The board privately contacted me to say they were considering removing her from the presidency. Meanwhile, I forwarded all Karen's online posts and documents to the military's legal affairs office, where an investigation was quietly launched into civilian harassment of an active officer. Later that week, my security camera caught her walking past my home again. This time she didn't yell. She didn't stomp. She just stared at the flag, her face twisted with a mix of resentment and defeat. Then she turned and walked away, shoulders slightly slumped. Maybe, just maybe, the reality was finally sinking in. But I wasn't done yet. While Karen thought this was over, I was just getting started. Her harassment wasn't just annoying, it was illegal. And the evidence I'd collected wasn't just for defense. It was ammunition. Because once the military's legal team finished reviewing her behavior, she wouldn't just be embarrassed, she'd be facing real consequences. The kind that couldn't be deleted from a Facebook post. The kind that came with signatures, badges, and charges. Karen's tantrum didn't fade. It evolved. After the public embarrassment at the emergency verification meeting, a sane person might have backed off, licked their wounds, maybe even offered a half-hearted apology. Not Karen. Her ego had taken a direct hit in front of the very people she had lorded over for years. And instead of regrouping with grace, she doubled down. By Monday morning, a new round of HOA notices were sent out, some to me, others to random neighbors, all under the guise of upholding new visual standards. These standards conveniently included restrictions on porch decor, vehicle decals, and flags of any kind. Subtlety was never her strength. But this attempt at a blanket policy was so transparent it was laughable. Still, I didn't laugh. Not yet. Because Karen wasn't just poking the bear anymore. She was trying to muzzle it. I began documenting everything with more precision. I photographed each letter, time-stamped every HOA post, and saved her online rants before she could delete them. I even started keeping a detailed log of every strange occurrence on my property, from the scratch across my mailbox to the suddenly malfunctioning gate sensor at the side entrance. It was becoming clearer each day that Karen was trying to provoke me again, hoping I'd slip, retaliate emotionally, and give her something to use. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. I hadn't become a base commander by letting petty provocations knock me off my path. Instead, I contacted a friend in the Office of Military Legal Support. I laid everything out, not as a complaint, but as an incident report. I knew how slow civilian cases moved, how easily someone like Karen could spin a narrative, especially if she caught the right person on the wrong day. But when it came to harassment of a federal officer, the Department of Defense didn't wait for a court date. They investigated, quietly and thoroughly. And when they acted, they didn't knock. They arrived with authority. In the meantime, I began noticing something odd. Neighbors who had previously smiled or waved started avoiding eye contact. Some seemed nervous. Others overly friendly, like they were trying to distance themselves from the crossfire. Then one evening, a retired Air Force colonel who lived 3 blocks down knocked on my door. He stepped in, looked around, then handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a copy of an anonymous letter that had been slipped under his door. It was titled, "Truth About the Pretend Commander." The entire thing was a mashup of half-truths, distorted facts, and outright fabrications, all attempting to make it look like I had stolen valor, lied about my rank, and faked my credentials. The formatting matched Karen's usual style, overuse of bold text, all caps in the title, and multiple fonts on the same page. The colonel said, "Thought you should see this before she poisons more minds." I nodded and thanked him, already slipping the paper into a folder marked evidence. It was one thing to argue at a meeting, but anonymous defamation? That crossed a legal threshold. And it also revealed something else. Karen was scared. She wasn't just angry now. She knew she'd messed up, but had no idea how deep the hole she was digging truly was. That week, I made a visit to Base Bravo in full uniform, not because I needed to, but because I knew optics mattered. I walked through the gate, saluted by the guards, and made my way to my office. On my desk sat a file that had just come in from the DoD Civilian Legal Coordination Team. Inside were the forms I needed to complete to initiate a formal civilian misconduct complaint. I filled them out with quiet satisfaction, each pen stroke a nail in the coffin Karen had built for herself. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for resolution, and consequences. The kind that followed you longer than gossip ever could. Later that afternoon, I got a call from my second-in-command. Apparently, someone had tried to contact the base under a fake identity, claiming to be investigating false military personnel in the area. The caller asked for access to personnel files, identifying details, even deployment records. The staff flagged it immediately and reported it. When I listened to the recording, the voice was unmistakable. Karen had dropped the HOA Queen Act and tried her hand at espionage light. She didn't just cross the line, she pole vaulted over it.